They called it junk. I called it home. It was the piano my grandmother taught me on, scratched, heavy, a little off-key, but alive in ways people weren't. When I was a child, I'd press the same middle C again and again until the house felt like it was breathing with me. But after she passed, the piano sat in our living room, gathering dust. My parents saw it as a burden, too big, too old, too useless. I remember the day they sold it. A man in overalls came with a dolly, the keys clattering as he pushed it toward the door. "Where's it going?" I asked. Dad shrugged. "Scrapyard. Better it gets recycled than take up space." It was raining that day. I can still hear the hollow thud of the truck door closing. Something inside me closed with it. Years later, when I saw that same piano listed in a local estate auction catalog, listed as old upright damaged frame, I knew it was mine. The wood looked warped, the ivory cracked. But I recognized it instantly, like recognizing your own voice on an old recording. They didn't know I was coming to bid. They didn't know I could. But they were about to. Because sometimes what you lose isn't gone. It's just waiting for you to come back strong enough to claim it. Main story. Begin's music was always my escape, even when my family treated it like noise. Mom used to roll her eyes when I practiced. "Do you have to keep playing that sad stuff?" she'd say, flipping through magazines at the kitchen table. "It's so depressing." Dad would mutter about the electric bill. My brother complained it made the TV hard to hear. Only Grandma understood. She was the one who sat beside me on that worn piano bench, smelling faintly of lavender and old books, whispering, "Play how you feel, not what they expect." After she passed, the piano became my last link to her, a weight in the house that felt like love. But when I came home from college one weekend, it was gone, just a dusty outline on the wall where sunlight used to hit its polished wood. Dad didn't even look up when I asked. "We sold it," he said. "It was falling apart. No one was using it anyway." I remember standing there, my throat tightening. "It was mine," I whispered. "No," he said. "It was in our house." And that was that. That night I sat outside on the back porch, listening to the crickets in the dark. It was the first time I realized something important. When people don't value what you love, they'll throw it away and call it being practical. I promised myself then, one day, I'd have a home where nothing I loved was treated like clutter. It took years. I left, worked part-time jobs, played in small bars, gave music lessons, and saved every dollar I could. I moved to the city, rented a tiny studio apartment, and filled it with secondhand instruments. All the things my family said were a waste of space. Every night, I thought of that piano. I imagined someone else playing it, or worse, no one at all. Then, one ordinary Thursday morning, I got a call from an old friend in town. "You won't believe this," she said. "They're selling your parents' estate next month. It's in the auction listings. I think that old piano's there, the one with the chipped key." For a second, I couldn't breathe. I opened the catalog online. There it was, Lot 47. Antique upright piano, minor damage. They didn't even know what they had. They'd lost it like they'd lost me, without realizing its worth until it was too late. I printed the listing and taped it to my wall. That night, I played a few soft notes on my keyboard and whispered to myself, "I'm going to bring you home." But this time, home wouldn't mean their house, it would mean mine. Driving back to my hometown after 7 years felt like walking into a memory I didn't ask to relive. The streets were smaller. The paint on the old bakery sign was chipped. The same cracked sidewalk outside the post office still made you trip if you didn't look down. But it wasn't the town that made my chest tighten. It was the air. That familiar silence that always seemed heavier when I was home. The auction was scheduled for Saturday morning at the community hall. The same one where I'd played my first recital at 12. Back then, I'd worn a blue dress Grandma sewed herself and played Claire de Lune so softly that the audience held their breath. I still remembered her whispering afterward, "You made the walls listen, sweetheart." No one else in my family said a word. When I parked outside the hall now, the lot was half full. Familiar faces in worn coats, the smell of coffee and rain, the faint creak of folding chairs being set up. I walked in quietly. Sunglasses on, coat collar turned up, no one recognized me. Not yet. Inside, rows of numbered items lined the walls. I scanned the list pinned by the stage. Furniture, paintings, garden tools, all marked from the Hartley estate. Item 47. Old upright piano, ivory keys, slight water damage. There it was. The same piano they once called junk. The same sound that once made me feel like I belonged to something real. I took a seat near the back. My bidding paddle resting on my lap. People whispered around me. Small town chatter. Such a shame they lost the house. Heard their daughters. Some kind of musician now. Didn't she move away for good? I smiled faintly. I'd spent years trying not to be defined by this place. And yet here I was, back in the middle of it, reclaiming something they'd thrown away. When the auctioneer took the stage, his voice echoed off the old wooden walls. Next up, Lot 47, antique upright piano, dated 1956, original wood. Opening bid, $200. $200. My parents had sold it for $50. A man in a flannel shirt raised his hand. $200. I lifted mine. $3. His eyes flicked toward me. A stranger in a black coat. He hesitated, then shrugged. The room murmured softly. $350? $400, I said without pause. The auctioneer nodded. We have $400. Any advance? No one moved, and then I heard a voice behind me. Deep. Familiar. $500. I froze. I turned slightly. Dad, I hadn't seen him in years. His hair was grayer, his face older, but the pride, that same unbending pride, was still there. He didn't recognize me at first. I could tell he just wanted the piano, maybe out of guilt. Maybe for show. My heart beat steady. $600. I said softly. His eyes narrowed as he finally looked closer. Then I saw it, that flicker of recognition, shock, confusion, something like shame. $650, he said, his jaw tightening. I raised my paddle again. $7. The room fell quiet. The auctioneer looked between us, sensing something unspoken. $700 going once. Going twice? I held his gaze the entire time. He blinked first. Sold, the auctioneer said. To the lady in the back, a soft clap of hands. The gavel hit the table, and just like that, it was mine again. The piano that carried my childhood, the one they'd discarded, the one I'd carried in my heart for a decade. Dad looked like he wanted to say something, but didn't. He just stood there, still defeated, maybe realizing for the first time that what he'd thrown away had come back home. Not to him, but because of him. I didn't stay for the rest. I signed the papers, paid in cash, and arranged for the piano to be delivered to my studio. As I walked out into the drizzle, I glanced once at the hall. It was the same building that once echoed with my first song. Now, it had heard my last silence. Because some stories don't end with applause. Some end with the quiet sound of getting back what was always yours. The movers brought the piano 2 days later. It was raining again. The kind of soft gray rain that makes the world look like it's remembering something. I stood by the studio window as the truck backed up, my breath fogging the glass. When they opened the doors, I saw it. My old upright, its wooden edges dulled, one key chipped, the varnish faded like old film. But beneath the wear, I saw it for what it truly was, a survivor, just like me. They set it down gently by the far wall of my studio. The room was small, but it had the one thing I'd always wanted, Silence. Real silence. The kind that lets a piano breathe again. When the movers left, I stood alone with it. The smell of old wood and dust mixed with the faint scent of rain on my coat. For a moment, I didn't move. I just stared at it. The piano that had been in our living room since I was 5. The same one I'd played while Mom cooked dinner and Dad watched TV, pretending not to listen. The same one Grandma used to polish every Sunday morning, whispering, "Music needs love, not perfection." I ran my fingers over the keys. They were colder than I remembered, slightly uneven. But when I pressed one, just one, the sound filled the room like an old friend clearing their throat after years of silence. It wasn't perfect, but it was alive. I sat down on the creaking bench and began to play. Slowly, hesitantly at first. Then with the rhythm my hands still remembered. The melody wasn't from any song. It was from memory. From the sound of losing and finding myself again. Halfway through, something inside the piano clinked. A tiny metallic sound like a coin dropping. I stopped, lifted the fallboard, and looked closer. There, tucked beneath the keys, was an envelope. Yellowed, sealed, written in a shaky, looping script I knew instantly. Grandma's. My heart stopped. I pulled it out carefully, afraid it might tear. The envelope was dated July 12th, the summer before she passed. I hadn't even known she'd written to me. Inside was a folded piece of paper, the ink faint but legible. "My dearest Lila, if you ever find this, it means you came back for what's yours. I always knew you would. They never understood what the piano meant to us." But it wasn't just wood and strings. It was a promise. Every note you played carried you closer to yourself. Never let anyone tell you your dreams are too quiet to be heard. When they forget to listen, play louder. Love, Grandma. Tears fell before I even realized I was crying. Not the kind of sobs that break you. The kind that release you. All those years I'd blamed myself for leaving. For not being stronger. For not saving what they took. And here she was, reminding me that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply waits until you're ready to play again. I placed the letter on top of the piano and played Claire de Lune, the same piece from my first recital. The same one she said made the walls listen, and this time, they did. The sound filled the room, warm and haunting, like her voice had come back for one more lullaby. When I finished, the rain had stopped. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, landing directly on the piano, soft, golden, almost sacred. I smiled through the tears. "I'm home, Grandma," I whispered. That night, I posted a photo of the piano on my social page. Not for revenge, not even for show. Just with the caption, "Some things you don't buy back. You simply bring them home." By morning, the post had gone viral. Old classmates, local newspapers, even a few magazines reshared it. Local musician reclaims family heirloom sold as scrap. The irony wasn't lost on me. They had sold my past for $50. And now, that same piano was worth more than their entire estate. Not in money, but in meaning. By the end of that week, I had stopped checking my notifications. Every time I did, there were more comments, more messages, more people tagging their friends with words like beautiful, full circle, healing. But what I didn't expect were the private messages, the ones from my family. The first came from Mom. The subject line was just one word. Wow. No greeting, no apology, just that word and a link to the article about me. The tone was familiar, the same tone she used when she used to discover I'd done something without her approval, a mix of disbelief and grudging acknowledgement. Her message read, "Saw the post. I didn't know it meant that much to you. We were just trying to clear space. Maybe we could talk sometime?" I stared at the screen for a long time before closing it. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because I had finally learned that silence can be its own kind of answer. 2 days later, Dad called. I hadn't heard his voice in 3 years. Hey, kiddo, he started, too casual, too rehearsed. We saw you on the local news. They said you bought the piano back. That's something, huh? I could hear Mom whispering in the background, prompting him. I pictured them sitting in the same kitchen where they'd once decided to sell it, probably at the same table, probably still surrounded by things they couldn't part with, except the one thing that actually mattered. It's good to hear from you, I said softly. I'm glad you saw it. He seemed thrown by how calm I was. Maybe he expected me to cry or accuse them. But I had no reason to. I had already taken back everything they'd taken, without raising my voice once. Well, he continued awkwardly, your mom was thinking maybe we could come by, see the piano again. Just for old time's sake. The same people who once called it junk now wanted to stand beside it for nostalgia's sake. I'll think about it, I said. I'm a little busy these days. It wasn't a lie. Between the interviews and a few music schools reaching out about teaching, my days were finally full of things that made me feel alive again. After we hung up, I sat down at the piano and let my fingers wander. The sound had improved after tuning, deeper, fuller, confident. Like it had been waiting to sing properly again, and as I played, I realized something. I didn't want to humiliate them. I didn't want revenge in the way I used to dream about on sleepless nights. What I wanted was balance. A quiet moment where truth stands on its own. No yelling, no cruelty. Just truth. That moment came sooner than I expected. 2 weeks later, I was invited to perform at a local charity gala. The same event my parents used to attend every year when they still had money from the farm. I almost said no, but something inside me, that quiet, brave voice that had been growing louder, whispered, "Go." The night of the event, I wore a navy dress, simple but elegant. As I walked into the ballroom, I felt eyes on me. Not in the way they used to look at me, with disapproval or pity, but with curiosity. And then I saw them. Mom in a floral shawl, Dad in the same suit he wore to every wedding and funeral. Their smiles froze when they realized the woman everyone was greeting, the one on the event poster, was me. When the host announced my name, a soft hush fell over the room. I walked to the small stage, the spotlight warm against my skin. The piano and my piano had been brought there for me to play. The same scratches still marked the wood. The same chip still hid beneath the low C key. I sat down and took a deep breath. I used to play this piano in my family's living room, I said softly into the microphone. When they sold it, I thought they'd sold my music too. But sometimes you have to lose something sacred to remember it was always yours. Then I played. The melody filled the room. A blend of old memories and new strength. Each note was a story, each pause a scar that had finally healed. When I finished, there was silence. The kind that doesn't come from emptiness. But reverence and then applause, real, thunderous, standing applause. From the corner of my eye, I saw Mom dab her eyes with a tissue. Dad tried to smile, but it looked more like a confession. After the show, they approached me hesitantly. Mom spoke first. You played beautifully, she said. Her voice trembled. I didn't realize what that piano meant to you. I smiled gently. It's okay, Mom. You didn't have to. She reached out as if to hug me, but I stepped slightly back. Not coldly, just with quiet control. I'm glad you came, I said instead. That moment, the space between us, was my boundary, clear and solid. When I left that night, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The version of me that had once begged to be seen was gone. The woman who walked out of that ballroom carried everything she needed: music, peace, and a promise kept to herself. A week later, the event photo was published in the local magazine. My name was printed under the headline, "From Scrap to Symphony, the pianist who reclaimed her story." I didn't send them a copy. I didn't have to, because I knew. When the magazine arrived in their mail, and they turned that glossy page, they'd see it. Me, sitting at the piano they sold. Me, smiling. Me, free. And that was enough. It's strange how silence can sound different once you've made peace with it. The same house that used to echo with emptiness now felt alive, humming softly with the memory of every note I'd played since the piano came home. Mornings had become my favorite. I'd wake before the sun, brew coffee, and open the curtains just enough to let the gold spill over the piano's lid. The first thing I did each day wasn't check messages or headlines. It was to press one key, any key, just to remind myself I could still make something beautiful from what was broken. People still commented on my posts, still shared my story like it was a fairy tale. But to me, it wasn't about fame or redemption. It was about quiet ownership of my story, my choices, my sound. A few weeks after the magazine issue, a small package arrived in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. Me as a little girl, maybe 6 years old, sitting at the piano in our old living room. My grandmother's hand rested on my shoulder. On the back, written in her handwriting, were 3 words. You kept playing. I smiled through tears. For the first time, I didn't feel like that little girl who lost everything. I felt like the woman she had been waiting to become. Later that week, I received another letter, this time from my parents' lawyer. It wasn't hostile. It wasn't apologetic either, just formal. The estate had been liquidated after their recent financial collapse. They were moving into a small rental near town. The letter mentioned one detail almost as an afterthought. Your name remains listed as heir for the piano and music rights registered in your ownership. It was ironic. The only thing they couldn't sell, the one thing that outlasted their plans, was the very thing they'd called worthless. That night, I played again. Not for an audience, not for applause. Just for myself. I played the same melody I'd once practiced while they talked over me at dinner. Only this time, every note sounded like forgiveness. Not for them, but for me, for the girl who thought she needed their approval to matter. Halfway through, the phone buzzed. It was Mom again. I didn't answer. I let the call fade into the rhythm of the song. Some goodbyes don't need words. They just need peace. After I finished playing, I sat there for a long time, hands still on the keys. The city outside had gone quiet, but the air inside the studio felt full of all the things they once tried to silence. Music, memory, me. I ran my hand along the wood, tracing the scratches they left behind, not to fix them, but to remember. They were proof of everything that survived. I thought about the day I first found the piano at that dusty auction. The auctioneer's hammer had fallen with a hollow thud, and I had walked away with more than an instrument. I had walked away with a story, and now every time I play, I know that story doesn't belong to them anymore. It belongs to me, the woman who rebuilt her melody from the silence they left behind. I often imagine Grandma somewhere listening, smiling softly the way she used to when I hit the right chord after hours of trying. I imagine her whispering the same words she wrote all those years ago. When they forget to listen, play louder, so I do, every day, and in that quiet studio, under the morning light, the piano sings, not as a relic of what was lost, but as the heartbeat of everything I reclaimed. They called it scrap. I called it home. And now it's both, a reminder and a beginning. A year has passed since the day I bought the piano back. If you walked into my studio now, you'd never guess it was once treated like trash. Sunlight still hits it in the same way every morning, warm, forgiving, almost proud. Its surface gleams, though I've left a few scratches untouched. Like small scars that tell their own truth. I don't hide them anymore. I've played on bigger stages since then, community halls, music schools, even a small festival last spring. Every time I perform, someone eventually asks about the piano. I never rush the story. I let them lean in close as I tell it, not like a tale of revenge, but like a lesson. That piano taught me patience, I say. It taught me that sometimes what's discarded still holds a heartbeat. And every time there's a pause afterward, a hush that feels sacred. Maybe they're thinking about their own losses or the things they gave up too soon. Maybe they're just listening the way my family never did. Last month, I got an email from my brother. Just a few lines. "Hey sis, I saw your name on a program at the festival. You were amazing. Mom and Dad talk about you a lot now. I think they wish they hadn't sold it." Or you. I read it twice, then 3 times. There was no anger left in me, no triumph either. Just a soft ache that felt like closure. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I took a photo of the piano, sunlight streaming over the keys, and sent it to him with a simple message. Tell them I understand. Because I did. I understood that some people can't love what they don't understand, not until it's gone. But I also understood something far greater. I no longer needed their understanding to exist. That night, I hosted a small recital in my studio. 10 guests, 1 piano, 1 story. When I finished playing, they stood, not for fame, not for spectacle, but for the music that came from something broken being whole again. As the applause faded, I looked at the piano and whispered, "We did it." And in the faint hum of its strings cooling, I could almost hear Grandma's voice again. "You kept playing." Outside, the night was quiet. The city lights glowed softly through the window, like distant constellations rearranging themselves just to watch. I walked to the door, turned off the lights, and glanced back once more. The piano sat there in the dark. Mine. Always, they sold it for scrap, but I played it back into life. And that sound, my sound, will never belong to them again.